And welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers Story Swap, the October meeting. And since we all know each other, I think we don't need to do introductions. And Ron Chick has made a request that he go first. So I'm going to change the view here. Let's see. We'll do speaker view.
Do we get to vote on that?
I have my son, daughter-in-law, grandson, and granddaughter right here tonight listening. So,
We vote in the affirmative.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, Ron, I think
somebody's going to Madeline.
She's right
Oh, she's right there. All right.
you can begin whenever you're ready.
I can begin whenever you're ready. Okay. Hey, I heard a version of this many years ago as a child from my grandmother. Okay, and then I heard a much better version of it at a book signing for a set of folk tales. And then I took that basic tale and I had children, particularly artistically talented children, draw parts of the story that they remembered for me for years. And I expanded the story based on children's imaginations. So this story has very little to do with the one that's in Witches, the famous collection of Halloween stories, or the one that can be found in Stories of the Midwest. It is my version of the Horned Witches. When my grandmother was a little girl, this was what happened on their small Kansas farm, on a Halloween night. And you got to realize that when my grandmother was a little girl, things were very different. Cars have been invented, of course, and some people had tractors, but most of the hardscrabble farmers in her area couldn't afford such a thing. So if you wanted to go anywhere, you hitched the plow horses up to the wagon and rode, or you walked. For that reason, you went to school, you went to church, but you didn't go out visiting very much. It just so happened that the next town over was going to have a Halloween ball that year. And what would have been my great-grandparents decided that they would go to the Halloween ball. And since it would be too far to ride back that night, they would stay in the next town and leave the farmhouse in charge of what would have been my great-great-grandmother. And that is where this story opens up. On a small Kansas farm in 1918, when my grandmother was a little girl. And for the rest of this story, I will refer to what would have been my great-great-grandmother as just the grandmother. The children had already had their Halloween treats and had been sent upstairs to the loft to sleep. And grandmother sat down, rocking and listening to the low Kansas wind blow across the prairie. And as she was rocking and knitting and listening, a knock came at the door. And grandmother, thinking it would be a late night neighbor or visitor, hurried to the door and lifted the latch and swung the latch open and pulled back the door. But it wasn't a neighbor, nor anyone she'd ever seen before. It was a very old woman, all dressed in black. She looked at grandmother and said, "I am the witch of one horn." And sure enough, growing right on the top of her head like a horn of a unicorn was a long white horn. Grandmother tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't work. And the witch pushed her way past her and went across the living room and sat down by the fire. Grandmother went back to her rocking chair, sat down, not knowing what at all to do, when, and the voice said, "Open." And grandmother, thinking it might be someone there who could help her, hurried to the door and lifted the latch and swung it open. But it wasn't anyone to help or anyone she'd ever seen before. It was another old woman, all dressed in black. even older and sort of pale, hey, and not at all pretty. And she looked at grandmother and said, I am the witch of two horns. And she pushed her way past grandmother and went across the room and sat down by the fire. And grandmother closed the door and sat back down. But no sooner had she started to rock when, open, cried the voice. Now look, kids, grandmother didn't want to open that door. She already had two strange old women calling themselves witches on Halloween night with horns on their heads. But still, her feet carried her across to the door, and she lifted up the latch and swung it open. And there indeed was a third old woman, all dressed in black. I am the witch of three horns, she said. I see the others have begun to arrive. And with that outrageous statement, she pushed her way past grandmother and went across the living room and sat down with the other witches. 4 witches, 5 witches, 6 witches, each one a little older than the one before. 7 witches, each witch, 8 witches, each one a little paler. 9 witches, 10 witches, 11 witches, each one a little uglier than the one before, all entered the living room in that exact same way. And just after the 11th witch had sat down with the gathered witches, the whole house shimmered and shook. And a voice came out of the night saying, open, witch's door. And the door swung open of itself. And there stood the most atrocious, horrid, ugly old crone you have ever imagined in all your life. Her nose was as long as my thumb and crooked and covered with warts. Her chin was so long and bony sharp that if she had nodded her head like that, she'd have poked a hole in her chest. Her skin was so wrinkled and deathly pale that grandmother thought it was the skin of someone long dead. And her eyes weren't the eyes of you and me at all, for they were fiery red and glowed with an evil light. She looked at the gathered witches and said, I see my coven has arrived. And she clapped her hands and vanished. And the door closed of itself. And the fire began to dance merrily in the fireplace. And there she was, sitting with the other witches.
Yeah.
They sat there for a few moments watching grandmother rock and not know quite what to do. And then the witch with 12 horns said, my dear, why don't you bake us a cake? Now look, grandmother didn't want to bake a cake for those horrible old women. But all by themselves, her legs picked her up out of her chair and dragged her off to the kitchen. And there she took out the flour and the sugar and the lard, but the pump wouldn't work. And there was no water in the kitchen. And she didn't know what she was going to do to bake a cake. And she thought, well, I'll get water from the stream at the bottom of the hill. And so she went out to the living room. She went over the door. She picked up the bucket. But now the bucket had hundreds of holes in it. She looked at it and the witch said, fetch the water in that. Well, she didn't know what else to do, so she rushed down to the bottom of the hill. She scooped up the water. She began to go back the hill and all the water poured out. So she went back down by the stream again and knelt down and began to go back up the hill, and all the water poured out. And suddenly grandmother was so afraid she didn't dare move. Just at that moment, the low Kansas wind seemed to blow right around her ears, saying, whoosh. Quickly, 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 fill the bottom of the bucket with moss and stones and mud, and it will hold the water. So grandmother went back by the stream side and filled the bottom of the bucket with stones and moss and mud and scooped up some water and began to go up the hill. And as she got closer to the house, the wind blew around her ears and said, quickly, 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 for the witches can return. Hey, call out to the mountain of the fairy people is on fire. Well, not understanding why, but being afraid not to obey, she set down the bucket, cupped her hands, and shouted into the house, the mountain of the fairy people is on fire, it's on fire. Inside the house and out flew witches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 witches flew like a single puff of black smoke. And last of all came the witch of the 12 horns. And she looked at grandmother and said, we'll be back. And vanished. Grandmother picked up the buckets and started to go into the house, and the wind blew around her ears. Quickly, 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 for the witches can return. Washed the feet of the sleeping children and cast it across the door. And not being understanding why, but afraid not to obey, she hurried upstairs and washed the feet of the sleeping children and came back down and closed the door and threw the water across it and put the bar in place and sat back down, but not for long. The wind blew around the chinks and cracks in the room and said, quickly, 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 for the witches can return. Take the cloth and put it half in and half out of a sewing drawer, a sewing basket. And she looked over, and where the witches had been sitting was an enormous wooden wool loom, and a cloth with it of many colors, and then gray wool as the last layer. Not knowing, understanding why, but afraid not to obey, she rushed over. She pulled the cloth off the loom. She put it in, half in and out of a drawer, and sat back down. Quickly, 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 whispered the wind one more time. Take the cake and break it, and put each piece in the mouth of a sleeping child. This she didn't understand, for she had made no cake. In fact, she hadn't even gotten started. But still, she went out to the kitchen, and there on the countertop was a small blood red cake shaped like a human skull the witches had somehow made in her absence. And being afraid not to obey, she carried it upstairs and began to break off pieces and put it in the mouths of the sleeping children. And just as the last piece of cake was in the mouth of the youngest child, the witches returned. They flew around and around and around the house, laughing and cackling and seemingly having a great time. Hey, and grandmother, not knowing what else to do, went back down to the living room and sat down, very much afraid. The witch of 12 horns called out, open, witch's door. And the door began to shimmer and shake as if some mighty hand were rattling it, but at last it fell still. And with a voice like a rusty old hinge called out, I can't. I've been cast with feet water. My spell is broken. I can't obey your summons. I can't. And fell silent. But the witches didn't seem upset. They just flew around and around the house, laughing and cackling. And the witch of 12 horns called out, open witch's cloth. And the cloth that was in the drawer right next to grandmother began to pull and shake and put about as if there were a hurricane in the house. But at last it fell still. And called out in a soft, silky voice, I can't obey your summons. I'm half in and half out of a basket. I can't obey your summons. I can't. And fell silent. And the witches flew around and around the house some more, no longer laughing, but shrieking with anger. And the witch of 12 horns called out, open, witches' cage! Of course, cake is broken. And in the mouths of sleeping children cannot answer at all. And at that moment, there was a mighty laughter from the night sky. And the witches realized that the spirit of the wind, who love all good and kind folks, had tricked them and broken their spells for that night. And they flew around and around and around the house some more, swearing they'd be back. Now, about this point in the story, I or one of my brothers and I say, "Oh, Grandma, you're just making that up." And she reached into her sewing basket and she pulled out a multicolored silk scarf, the top layer of which was ugly gray wool. And she always said that that was the cloth the witches had made when she was asleep as a small child. But in all these years, the witches have never returned. But if ever you're alone on a Halloween night, should a wind be blowing outside your door and a voice call out to open, "Don't do it!" they're undoubtedly after you. The tale of the 12 horned witches, slightly abbreviated style.
That's awesome.
That was great, Ron. Great story.
So anybody else got any spooky stories tonight? I'm gonna have to cut out here, so. Anybody going to Ojai this next 2 weeks from now?
Oh,
No.
not sure.
Well, we'll be there and the Whittings will be there, Dave and Diana Whitting, Whiting. So probably some other people I know. Anyhow, I'll get back to you guys next month.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Have a lovely evening. Oh, come here, Grayson. This
Hey,
is Grayson. You saw him last month. This is Madeline.
Hi, Grace and Madeline. Okay.
Thanks,
so
Ron. That was fun.
That was fun. Okay, who would like to tell the next story?
Well, I can tell one tonight.
Okay, Nick,
Yay,
you go
good.
next.
Because this is both the Halloween season and near the end of Hispanic Heritage Month, I thought I'd bring you a ghost story from Spain. This is one I learned from some of the stories that Jane Yolen collected for an anthology many years ago. And I just like this one because it's got parts of a couple of other stories woven into it. That's one of those things that happens with European stories, but not quite like this. And this is the tale of the tinker and the ghost. Many, many years ago, near Toledo, there was a tinker, Esteban. And Esteban was a nice enough man, but he had no real goals. He didn't want to be rich. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to go his own way and have enough to eat and have a warm fire to sit by. And to do that, he would fix things for people. He would wander from place to place as a tinker, and he would repair things and mend things. And frankly, he was good at it, but that was all. There was nothing special about what he did. He was just a tinker. Well, one day he was walking and he realized that he needed to replenish his supplies of food before the night, or else he wouldn't be able to cook anything for his dinner. And one thing he did enjoy was eating. So he saw that there was a little village, and on the hill above the village was a great big mansion. And he thought to himself, well, if I can fix something for the people at the mansion, they should reward me handsomely, and I can buy food in the village. And so he came to the village and started up the path to the mansion. And one of the people in the village said, wait, don't go up there. Why not? Said Esteban. Well, if you go up there, the ghost will get you. The ghost? Yes, the Lord who owns that mansion doesn't even live there himself. He's offered a huge reward for anyone who can get rid of the ghost, and everyone who has tried it has died. Said Esteban. I've not seen a ghost. They might be interesting, but they don't fill my belly. He started to walk away, and the man said, wait, you mean you would go there to that house if we give you food? Well, a dozen eggs, a rasher of bacon, and wood cook it in the fireplace, and I would at least go there and try to get rid of the ghost for you. if you got rid of the ghost, the lord of that mansion would give you a great deal of money. That would be good too. But do you have the eggs and the bacon and the wood? Let me get them. And he ran to the houses nearby, and they gathered a dozen eggs and a rasher of bacon and food that would burn for the entire night. And if you don't succeed, we'll make sure that your body gets a good burial. Well, that was not very reassuring, but Esteban continued up the hill anyway. He went inside the house, and it was dusty, but nicely made and looked like it had been well maintained. He went over and built a fire in the fireplace with some of the wood. And he got out his own frying pan off of the donkey that he brought with him to carry his tools and things, and began cooking some of the bacon. And after he cooked some of the bacon, he put it off to the side to drain the oil off of it and began to fry an egg. And then he began to hear the strangest thing from the chimney above the fireplace. Who is there? It is only I, Esteban the tinker. Don't worry about it. And he began frying his egg. Now, there's a trick to frying eggs properly in Spain, of course. You must do it so that the edges are crisp and the center is soft. And with the bacon grease there, you have to keep it just hot enough to do this just right. So he didn't want to be interrupted. Whoever you are, I'm coming down. Well, Esteban pulled the frying pan out of the fireplace. He wanted to make sure the egg was not disturbed by whoever was coming down the chimney. And the person coming down the chimney was part of a person. A leg came down, a left leg to be precise, wearing the left side of a pair of pants. Esteban stopped and said, "Is there any more of you coming?" "Not now," came the voice from the chimney, but the leg hopped out of the fireplace, probably so as not to catch on fire. "Good, I will continue cooking then." And so he finished cooking the egg and pulled it out and put it onto his little plate and began to eat the egg with some of the bacon. "I'm coming down," said the voice from the chimney again. And this time the right leg came down, also wearing half of a pair of pants, because it seemed only fair, since the left leg had the left side, the right leg should have the right side of the pair of pants. And so now there were two legs, properly clad, standing there near the fireplace. Esteban looked over and said, "That's nice," and continued cooking. He wanted another egg. And so he began to fry a second egg in the frying pan there over the fire. And when the warning came again, "I'm coming down," he pulled the frying pan away, and this time a left arm came down, wearing the left sleeve of a shirt. Well, this, of course, went on. The right arm came down. By this time, he had stopped cooking and was just eating what he'd already cooked. A torso came down, wearing the middle part of the shirt, of course. And finally, a head. It bounced in the fireplace and rolled out of the fireplace. And it was a nice enough head. It had long black hair and a pleasant face. And it looked up at Esteban and said, "You haven't run away." "No," said Esteban, "I was cooking." And you haven't died in fright." "No," said Esteban. "There was no need to do that. I was just cooking bacon and eggs and watching you come down the fireplace." Well, the ghost, for that's what it was, assembled itself, legs and torso and arms and head on top, and said, "You are a truly amazing man. And because you have not died of fright or run away, I have a favor to ask of you, and I promise to reward you for that favor if you can do this for me. You see, I would really like to stop being a ghost and go on to the next life, but there's something holding me here. The way I died was at the hand of bandits near the bottom of the hill. And it was because, well, I had found 3 bags of treasure, and it turned out it belonged to the bandits. And I had hidden the treasure away, and the bandits caught up with me and told me they were going to kill me for stealing their treasure, and they did so before they thought about the fact that I hadn't told them where the treasure was. And so I am tied to the treasure and to my death, and I'm still here. If you would pray for me and distribute the treasure as I ask, I promise to reward you. Well, Esteban thought, oh, this is not a bad thing. I will give you your final prayer and let me know how I can help you. And so he prayed and said nice things about the ghost. And the ghost said, thank you. Near the bottom of the hill, outside the village, there is a tree, an olive tree, with markings on it, for it is a very old tree. And buried under the tree are 3 bags. 1 bag of copper coins, 1 bag of silver coins, and 1 bag of gold coins. I ask that you give the bag of copper coins to the church, and that you give the bag of silver coins to the poor in the city of Toledo. And you may keep the bag of gold coins for yourself as your reward for helping me and for helping others. For I'm sure that the bandits are long dead and they don't need the money they had obviously stolen from someone else and killed over. And so Esteban promised to do that. And the ghost, well, did the strangest thing. The head and the arms and the torso and the legs all became unsolid, and the clothing fell to the floor as the spirit went up the chimney, presumably all the way to heaven. Esteban folded the clothes, put them on his donkey, along with the frying pan and the leftovers that he had. He wanted them for breakfast. And then got to sleep and woke up in the morning, fixed himself an omelet with the leftover eggs, and started to go back down the hill. Now, coming up the hill were people from the village, and they had brought with them a hastily made coffin and tools for digging a grave in case they needed to use those things. And they were overjoyed that Esteban was not dead. And he said, no, I'm not dead, but the ghost is gone, and the proof is his clothes. And they said, the proof is his clothes? Yes, these were the clothes that the ghost wore. You can see that the sleeves and the legs were not very heavily attached to the clothes. That's because he was all separated up the chimney. The townsfolk didn't understand a word of what he was saying, but they congratulated him on having saved the mansion from the ghost and told him where he could find the lord who owned it, who would give him a great reward of 1,000 reales. And he said, that's fine, I will do that. And then they went back down, saved the coffin for another day, and he went off to find the olive tree. And he found the olive tree that was marked as the ghost had said, and he dug under it, and he found 3 bags of coins, 1 of copper, 1 of silver, and 1 of gold. So he put those onto his donkey, went off to find the lord who owned the mansion, told him that the mansion was now safe and not haunted anymore, at least as far as he could tell. The lord went up with him. They checked the place, and the lord of the mansion was so happy he gave him the 1,000 reales that very day. And so it was that Esteban went back to Toledo, and he went to the biggest church that he could find there in the city. and gave the priest of that church a bag of copper coins. And then he asked the priest where he could help the poor the most. And the priest told him of a place where there were many poor and many orphans who were in need of help. And there it was that he took the bag of silver coins. But as the ghost had told him, he kept the bag of gold coins for himself. And with that and the 1,000 reales, he bought himself a small place to live and found ways to make a little bit of money here and there when he needed it. But he had really enough because all he needed was a place for a fire and food to eat and a place to sleep. Because after all, he was a simple tinker. And that was the story of the tinker and the ghost.
Nice.
Right.
Very
great
fine,
story.
very nice.
Okay, thank you, Nick. That was great. So anyone else have a story would like to be next? Oh, I see Penny Post has joined us from the East Coast, although we don't see her picture. Can you unmute yourself, Penny, and say hi? There she is.
Hey.
So Penny was a good friend of Patricia Snow and Patricia's husband as well. Oh, you're still muted. You have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Yes, Patty and John were very, very dear to me, but so is Nick. And I was thrilled to come into the middle of Nick's story. Well, I think more or less the beginning. But Nick Smith gave me my start in storytelling, really. He kept making me do workshops. He said, oh, do a workshop on this, do a workshop on that for the summer solstice festivals. And it really springboarded everything I did in storytelling. And I'm still doing it. And that's why I'm in this group. That's why I came into this group. And thank you, John, for bringing me back. Because it really mattered a whole lot to me. It was just wonderful to come into the middle of Nick's story.
So I reconnected with Penny. I remembered her from the Story Swap festivals, you know, that Southern California Story Swap festivals we had every year, and went to one of her workshops. And I reconnected with her because of
Patty Snow, right?
no, oh shoot. Oh, the Sheila Arnold is doing Sacred Stories, and she contacted me because it's a once a month thing, and she honors deceased storytellers, and she goes searching through the internet and came across our website and read the thing about Patricia Snow and emailed me and said, can we honor Patricia Snow at our next Sacred Stories Zoom event? And I said, sure. And she said, and is there anybody from your group that would like to tell a story? And I said, well, I would. and plus I told some stories about my experiences with Patricia. And then at the end, when people could, do comments and stuff, then I saw Penny and we connected. So glad you could make it here.
I had it obviously on my calendar since we're 3 hours difference.
Right. Yeah. What state are you in?
Massachusetts.
Oh yeah. That's
and I desperately miss California, which is why I try to be engaged in California groups.
Where are you in Massachusetts?
South Shore, Hingham.
Hingham.
It's a senior residence, and a good thing, but it's not my home, but it's okay.
Yeah. I'm so glad you could join us. And you know, in the email I sent to you today, I included the link to our YouTube channel, and you can go there and listen to. We've been doing Zoom stuff for over a year now.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. I saw that, and I will pursue that. Thank you.
And Nick tells a story almost every month.
I know. I watched you, Nick, and I could not believe that you were still doing that amount of work, because I know what work is in storytelling, which is, I don't call myself a storyteller. I say I tell stories, but I'm not a storyteller, because I know how much work goes into all the preparation, and I appreciate it hugely.
Well, the
Um,
weird thing is that the COVID shutdowns caused me to actually finally do videos of a bunch of stories. So that was worth the effort, but a lot of craziness.
Yeah, well, that too. But oh, Nick, I mean, your storytelling, you got me into it in a way that I cannot describe. You kept inviting me to do workshops when I didn't feel able to, and I did them, and I grew, and I've been grateful to you ever since.
Well, I'm glad you were able to do that, because I still remember one of the workshops in particular that I kind of coerced you into doing, which was the one about the stories and songs together.
Yeah, Karen Jolly. Yeah, I know.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was hugely valuable to me. I had a very funny experience with that, by the way. I was, I moved to the East Coast, back to the East Coast, 15 years ago, and but this is before, way before that. This is right when I was doing, right like a year after I was doing the workshops with Karen Jolly, and it's like 30 years ago, and I came to this place, a village that I really liked, and I went to an antique store that I really liked, and I was looking, and this woman had a telephone conversation, and I looked at the books she had for sale, which I normally don't do. She had all five of the Francis Child books, and I had been involved with those deeply for a year with Karen. And I went, ah! And she said, I'm sorry, dear, did you see a mouse? I said, no, I want those books. And I got the Francis Child 5-volume series on English folktales. It was fantastic. And I still have them, and I still treasure them. And I'm still grateful to you, Nick, for putting me in touch with her to do that workshop, because it meant a whole lot to me. I never got the chance to say that to anybody, so I'm glad to have this chance now. It was wonderful.
I think Nick has fostered a lot of budding storytellers behind the scenes in his own quiet way. So little does he know how many people he's touched. I know I'm one of them. So I hear you. That's, yeah.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so
can I take this moment to invite people to something coming up?
yes, go ahead.
Yes, please.
Those of you who have been around storytelling and folk music in California for the last few years know about a thing called Folkworks.
Yeah.
And Folkworks is doing kind of an online party on November the 6th. And they wanted me to invite storytellers to come and hang out in a storytelling Zoom room as part of the event and just have fun doing whatever we want. It's going to be nominally from 4 to 7 p.m. on November the 6th. They may keep it open later, but there are other rooms for other things if you want to move back and forth to musicians and things. but they promised to give us a special Zoom room just for storytelling at it.
What day of the week is November 6th?
That's a Saturday,
Okay.
and 4 to 7 p.m. So if you have later evening obligations, there's no problem. But they're nice enough people, and it was a fun thing for them to offer. And they do want to keep promoting storytelling on the West Coast. They've moved up farther north. The couple that runs Folkworks have moved up north, but they want it to be more of a West Coast thing than just a Southern California thing. So they want to promote storytelling all up and down the coast if we let them know about it. But anyway, I will send you, John, the information I have about when and where to go to get onto it if you want to pass that on to people.
Right. I can send that out with a summary of this meeting.
Great. I will do that then.
Okay. And I just got a message from Adrian saying she'd like to be next to tell
Oh.
a story. So
just wanted to, and so there weren't any more of those awkward silences wondering who's going to go next.
Adrian, why don't you go for it?
Okay, well, and I apologize. I do need to read it to you. I had my COVID booster last week, and sometimes they tell you it's going to be worse than even the second shot. Yeah, I just started feeling normal today, and it's been 5 or 6 days. So, but still better than getting COVID. So, so I thought, this isn't really a Halloween story, and yet I realized that we're in a period of time right now where it's rather terrifying how much people will believe when they're told things. No matter what it is that they're told, they'll believe it. And so I have found a little story, and it's in the Treasury of Best Love Fairy Tales, and this is from the Lilac Fairy Book. This is the Andrew Lang series, and it's called The Believing Husbands. Once upon a time, there dwelt in the land of Erin a young man who was seeking a wife, and of all the maidens round about, none pleased him as well as the only daughter of a farmer. The girl was willing, and the father was willing, and very soon they were married and went to live at the farm. By and by, the season came when they must cut the peat and pile them up to dry so that they might have fire in the winter. So on a fine day, the girl and her husband and the father and his wife all went out upon the moor. They worked hard for many hours, and at length grew hungry, so the young woman was sent home to bring them food, and also to give the horses their dinner. When she went into the stable, she suddenly saw the heavy pack saddle of the speckled mare just over her head, and she jumped and said to herself, "Suppose that saddle pack were to fall and kill me, how dreadful it would be." And she sat down under the pack saddle she was so much afraid of and began to cry. Now the others out on the moor grew hungrier and hungrier. "What can have become of her?" asked they. And at length the mother declared that she would wait no longer and must go see what had happened. As the bride was nowhere in the kitchen or the dairy, the old woman went into the stable where she found her daughter weeping bitterly. "What is the matter, my dove?" And the girl answered between her sobs, "When I came in and I saw the pack saddle over my head, and I thought how dreadful it would be if it fell and killed me." She cried louder and louder than before. The old woman struck her hands together. "Oh, to think of it! If that were to be, what should I do?" And she sat down by her daughter, and they both wrung their hands and let their tears flow. "Something strange must have occurred," exclaimed the old farmer on the moor, who by this time was not only hungry, but cross. "I must go after them." And he went and found them in the stable. "What is the matter?" asked he. "Oh," replied the wife, "when our daughter came home, she did not see the pack saddle over her head, and she thought how dreadful it would be if it were to fall and kill her." "Ah, to think of it," exclaimed he, striking his hands together, and he sat down beside them and wept too. As soon as the night fell, the young man returned full of hunger, and there they all were, crying together in the stable. "What is the matter?" he asked. "Why then, what? When thy wife came home," answered the farmer, "she saw the pack saddle over her head, and she thought how dreadful it would be if it were to fall and kill her." "Well, but it didn't fall," replied the young man, and he went off to the kitchen to get some supper, leaving them to cry as long as they liked. The next morning, he got up with the sun and said to the old man and to the old woman and to his wife, "Farewell. My foot shall not return to this house till I have found 3 people as silly as you." And he walked away till he came to the town, and seeing the door of a cottage standing open wide, he entered. No man was present, but only some women spinning at their wheels. "You do not belong to this town," said he. "You speak truth," they answered, "nor you either." "I do not," replied he, "but it is a good place to live in, isn't it?" The women looked at each other. "The men of the town are so silly that we can make them believe anything we please," they said. "Well, here is a gold ring," replied he, "and I will give it to the one amongst you who can make her husband believe the most impossible thing." And he left them. As soon as the first husband came home, his wife said to him, "Thou art sick." "Am I?" asked he. "Yes, thou art. Take off your clothes and lie down." So he did. And when he was in his bed, his wife went to him and said, "Thou art dead." "Oh, am I?" asked he. "Thou art," said she. "Shut thine eyes and stir neither hand nor foot." And dead he felt sure he was. Soon the second man came home, and his wife said to him, "You're not my husband." "Oh, am I not?" asked he. "No, it is not you," answered she. So he went away and slept in the wood. When the third man arrived, his wife gave him supper, and after that he went to bed just as usual. The next morning, a boy knocked at the door, bidding him attend the burial of the man who was dead. And he was just going to get up when his wife stopped him. "Time enough," she said, and he lay still till he heard the funeral passing the window. "Now rise and be quick," called the wife, and the man jumped out of bed in a great hurry and began to look around him. "Why, where are my clothes?" asked he. "Silly that you are. They're on your back, of course." "Are they?" he said. "They are," she said, "and make haste lest the burying be ended before you get there." Then off he went, running hard, and when the mourners saw a man coming toward them with nothing on but his nightshirt, they forgot in their fright what they were there for and fled to hide themselves. And the naked man stood alone at the head of the coffin. Very soon a man came out of the wood and spoke to him. "Do you know me?" "Not I," answered the naked man. "I do not know you." "But why are you naked?" asked the first man. "Am I naked? My wife told me that I had all my clothes on," he answered. "And my wife told me that I myself was dead," said the man in the coffin. But at the sound of his voice, the 2 men were so terrified that they ran straight home, and the man in the coffin got up and followed them. And it was his wife that gained the gold ring, as he had been sillier than the other 2.
All right, that's it. That's a fun story.
Oh, it's unfortunate that we have people in our society today who are just that easily swayed to believe things. So I thought that's kind of terrifying. That'll fit.
Yes, yes, it is. All right. Well, who would like to be next? I think we lost Ron Evans.
Hi,
Elizabeth.
this is Elizabeth. Yeah, well, I haven't attended the meetings for a while now. I'm gonna try to tell a story.
Okay.
It is a story. It is a little short story. from a book that is called America's Haunted Houses. So this story goes like this. It was this beautiful young lady from a well-to-do family. They had a beautiful house, very elegant, and with upstairs and downstairs. The young lady was at the age that she was preparing to be presented, introduced in the society. So she had a very beautiful dress tailored for her. She was so excited and eager to go to the ball. It was the season of balls and parties, and all the young ladies were presented and taking place in dances and society games. Very busy, exciting season. This story happens in 19th century, so we are looking at 1800s. The dresses back then were beautiful dresses. They had the skirts very puffy. And that type of style was maintained wearing underskirt, something like a cage, which actually was made out of metal. So it was probably beautiful but heavy to move around and carry that, but that is the truth about that. We saw them in museums and other places. So she had one of those dresses with the underskirt cage to maintain her beautiful puffy dress. So the evening that she was supposed to go with her parents to this important ball, she fell. She slept on the stairs. She fell all the way down. And in that unfortunate fall, the skirt, the underskirt, the cage, the metal cage, underskirt, harmed one of her legs. The thing is, it was harmed beyond repair. So they had to amputate one of her legs. She was left a disabled person, very sad, very hard to go over that. And but she grew, she got older, she got on with her life. Family went along with her, but she became kind of a hermit. She avoided to meet people. She avoided company of people's outside the household. She became really very isolated. She imposed this isolation on herself. So the parents grew old, of course. They passed on. She never married. She kept her isolation, and the fact that she was disabled was not something to attract any suitor, or maybe she didn't trust anybody, but she never married. So she lived in that house until the end of her life. And she really became quite a lonely person toward the end. And she passed on in that house. Now, that house was a gorgeous home. It was preserved by the family, and then it was preserved as a historic home. And it is on the register of the haunted house, because every time where it is the season of balls and introducing young ladies, so late fall before Christmas, all that season that everybody is going to parties and is very happy and excited, someone can hear someone walking with a wooden leg on the stairs going up and down. But it doesn't happen all the time. It just happened in this particular season.
All right.
That's the story.
Ooh, very creepy.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Elizabeth. Okay, Barbara, you want to tell yours? You're muted.
You must get sick of saying that.
No.
Really sick. So there was a farmhouse and everything about it went wrong. Old nanny witch had come and put a hex on that house and nothing worked right. The gate, she told the gate, don't let anybody that lives in this house go through this gate. And they couldn't get out to their crops. They couldn't get out to their sheep. They couldn't take care of their farm. And the hen house door, she told the hen house door, let no one who lives in this house pass through this door. So they couldn't take care of their chickens. They couldn't have any eggs. And then the well, oh my goodness, she told the well, let no one that lives in this house draw from this well. So they couldn't even have porridge for their dinner. No water for the animals. The mother was complaining, the father was complaining, the brothers were complaining. And the little girl, she just took a pail and went down to the nearby stream to get some water. But when she got there, she saw a whole crowd of people and they were trying to drown a little white dog. They were trying to drown a little white dog. One person said, oh, it's just too little to be a good guard dog. No one said, oh, it's just so scruffy and it's too little to even be a good house dog. There's no reason to even keep it. We ought to just drown it. And she said, oh, but please wait. Would you give it to me? I would love it. And so they did. She went home with this little dog and the mother fussed. Well, that dog is just going to die of thirst because we're all going to die of thirst. And the father said, that dog's not good for a house dog or a guard dog. And so she said, but maybe it would be loved and it would love us. And the mother said, well, we don't have any water. We don't have any hens. We have nothing. And the little dog said, woof, woof, woof. Let me take care of that. What can you do? Woof, woof, woof. Let me take care of that. I can fix it. And he ran out the door. Well, he can't get through that gate, but he did. He did, because the gate said to him, you can't go through this gate. No one from this house can go through this gate. He said, but I'm not part of the house yet. And he went on down and he went to the hen house. And the hen house door said, oh, you can't come in here. Nobody from this house can come in here. And he said, but I'm not from the house yet. And he went and settled all the hens down in their little nests. And pretty soon they were going to be willing to give eggs again. He also went through the gate and got all the sheep and brought it back to the sheepfold. So the father and the brother were happy. And then he went to the well. And the well said, oh, you can't have any water here. There's a hex on me. Little granny witch has put a hex and you can't have anybody that lives at this house cannot draw water. And he said, woof, 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 but I don't live here yet. And so he drew the water and they had porridge that night. Well, they all thought, this is a good little doggy. But he said, I'm not finished. I'm not finished. Woof, woof, woof. Here came little Granny Smith and Granny Witch, and she was coming down the the path and she walked around the house. She walked around that farmhouse, round and round and round. But that little dog, he was behind her. And the witch said, well, this is going to fix them. I'm walking around counterclockwise and that'll fix all my hexes. And the little dog said, oh, no, it won't, because I've been walking behind you and I've been walking backwards the whole way and erasing all your feet. What? She turned around so fast that she lost her broom. And you know, if a witch loses the broom, they don't have any powers. So she said, scat, scat. And the little dog said, you can't say scat to me. I'm not a cat. And besides barking, I can also bite. He started biting and he started barking and biting and barking until that old granny witch just rolled away and went away forever. So the little girl said, so now may we keep the little tyke? And the mother said, of course. And the little tyke says, but I'm too scruffy. Oh no, our cat's scruffy too and we love him. Well, I'm too small. Oh, but you have good teeth, said the father, and you could bite. But I'm just too much trouble. Oh no, we all want you. We love you. And so he turned around and turned around 3 times, as dogs often do, and he settled in the little girl's lap and went sound asleep. That's the story of the wee little tyke dog.
All right. Great story. Great story. Thank you,
I have
Barbara.
a little dog that I'm trying to weave into it, but I'm not there yet.
Oh, how cute is that? Goodness.
It's a cute little dog. It's a cute little dog.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, so I actually have a story that I'd like to tell about my pets. Let's see, where am I? Here I am. The spotlight on me. And we've had pets actually for most of our married life. The first pets we got, I think was in the 2nd year of our marriage. And most of the time we've had pets. And, you know, pets bring a special kind of joy to a house. And over the years, we've had some very unusual pets. Like there was this one little dog who showed up in our garage. Most of our pets are rescue animals. And lately we've been going to rescue organizations. But before that, we didn't need to because they just showed up at our house and, you know, starving. And this one dog was in our garage. It was a Memorial Day weekend. It was and it was hot in there, and he seemed friendly enough and had no collar, and so we just sort of adopted him and called him Squanazy. And Squanazy had one particular behavior that was quite unusual. He fancied himself a hunter, and he loved to hunt butterflies. Only he never caught one because, you see, he hunted their shadows. And in the yard, he would jump from one place to another, chasing this shadow of a butterfly fluttering around, thinking he would catch it, but he never caught them. And it was just hilarious to see him do that. Another thing he would do is if he did something wrong or perceived that he had done something wrong and didn't want to come when we called him, he would do this slow walk where he'd slowly pick up a paw and put it down, and then pick up the other paw and put it down. And just hilarious to watch him do this slow walk. Another dog we had, his name was Gandolf. And we had gone on a vacation and my mother was taking care of the pets. And she arrived one day and Gandalf was out in the front yard. And she was surprised and alarmed. And he seemed intent that he wanted them to follow him. And so he went around out to the sidewalk and left our yard, looking back to make sure he was being followed, went over to the park next door to us and took my mother to a place where there was a hole in the fence where he had escaped the yard. And he showed them how he got out. And he seemed very proud that he could show them that. And of course, then they plugged the hole and he didn't get away anymore. But the most amazing story had to do with a dog named Mumbo that we got when I was a child. And I think I must have been about 10 or so, 9 or 10. And I wanted a dog. And we had a rabbit back in Pennsylvania as a pet. And at that time in Ontario, we had a pet parakeet, which was a well-trained parakeet because my oldest brother Jim had taught it to say things. And it could say, "Merry Critty Critty," and "Happy New Year," and "Uh-oh, I goofed." And my dad had built in the corner of our TV room, taken a piece of plywood and had built a platform in the corner that we put the bird cage on, and he had all kinds of toys were out there. The bird's name was Snitchy. And there were these toys that it could peck at, and it would tip over and then come back up and tip over and come back up, and little bells he could peck on. And Snitchy, we never trimmed Snitchy's wings, and he would fly around the room when he wanted some exercise. Well, when we got the dog, we knew that it might be a problem to have the bird flying around the room when the dog was in the room. And so we made sure that when the dog was in the TV room, Snitchy was in the cage, safe. Well, one day, somebody forgot to put Snitchy away in the cage. And Mumbo went after that flying bird, leapt into the air and caught it in his mouth and killed the bird. And we were all devastated. So, as chance would have it, 2 weeks later, a parakeet showed up in our yard, in our backyard. And my parents said, "We can't keep this bird because the dog will just kill it. Let's make up some signs, post them on the telephone poles in the neighborhood, and surely someone will claim the bird." So we made signs and posted them, but no one came to claim the bird. And then my brother Bill had an idea. He said, "I will train the dog to not chase the bird." And we were all pretty skeptical, but my brother was pretty strong-willed. And so we had been keeping the bird in the cage and took it out. And I believe we clipped its wings so it couldn't fly around. And my brother Bill started to try to desensitize Mumbo, the dog, to this bird. And he would have sessions that would last 10, 15 minutes. And the dog was very obedient. So he would say, "Sit, stay." And Mumbo would sit and stay. And then he'd bring the bird out and put the bird on the floor, starting out about 10 feet away. And the bird would walk around and Bill would say, "Stay, stay." And the dog would stay sitting. Well, each session, Bill would bring the bird closer to the dog. And Mumbo was very obedient. He stayed, he didn't do anything. And eventually, the bird could walk over the dog's paws, and Mumbo would stay. Well, one day, it had been a particularly long session and very successful. And Bill was so pleased, but he made a mistake. He wanted to praise the dog and say, "Good dog." But before he said "good dog," he said the word "okay." He said, "Okay, Mumbo, good dog." Well, the word "okay" means kind of like you are released from the previous command. And so as soon as he said, "Okay, Mumbo, good dog," Mumbo, with the bird right down at his feet, reached down, opened his mouth, and caught the bird in his mouth. Well, immediately Bill pounced on the dog. He pried the dog's jaws open. The bird's tail feathers were sticking out of the dog's mouth. He pried the dog's mouth open. The bird hopped out unharmed onto the floor. Remarkably, it was like a cartoon that the bird had not been harmed by the dog. Well, unfortunately, I think it brought home the point to my brother that there are some things you just can't train out of an animal. There are some instincts. And Mumbo was a poodle, and poodles were good hunting dogs. And so we eventually found somebody to take the bird, but we kept the dog and never got a bird again. And that's my story.
Oh boy.
That's fun. I love it.
Yeah, that has all the elements of a cartoon.
Yeah, the bird was not hurt at all. It was amazing.
Really?
And
I
and not really even upset. It was so used to being around the dog that
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
so we gave away the bird and the cage, found somebody that would take a bird.
The funny part is I had a dog and a parakeet who at least occasionally interacted. And I think the dog didn't think that the parakeet was a real bird because it made talking noises and walked around the floor and only occasionally flew. And
Yeah.
he didn't know what it was, but he didn't make any effort to hunt it. But that's really funny.
Yeah.
Just the idea of catching the bird because your brother said the wrong thing.
Yep. Yep. So I guess we're for the time being, we're just gonna stick with Zoom. And however, COVID new cases are going down in California, particularly LA County now is under the threshold of 100 new cases per 100,000. It's down to about 78, I believe. It's still a problem in rural sections of California where there are a lot of unvaccinated people. But in the urban areas, COVID numbers have really, really come down from the peak that we had a couple months ago. And so at this point, we're still planning on doing a live in-person celebration. And we're not going to make that call until maybe 2 weeks beforehand and see what the numbers are like. And of course, it has, Ellen has to be in agreement, Ellen Harper. But what do you guys think about that?
Great.
When
that
is that the celebration? When is what date?
So it's November 20th.
Uh-huh.
I'm actually going to a much larger event a week after that. And with the restriction that people be vaccinated and wearing masks, I don't see a problem with having something the size of the celebration, to be honest.
Yeah. I wonder if Ellen would be willing to stipulate people must wear masks and be vaccinated.
I think the vaccination is an extra layer, but the masks are what's important.
Uh-huh. Right.
I went to a concert recently in Riverside, and they asked for a vaccination card and mask. And I didn't see anybody frustrated with that.
Uh-huh.
Everybody was pretty, okay with it.
Yeah.
And it was a full house. So
Uh-huh.
I'm still here. So
Yeah.
I didn't get it. I didn't get anything, God
Yeah.
forbid.
And
The same thing
coffee-
with the LA Opera. They gave each person a little orange plastic band if you'd already been checked to show your vaccination card, and then you weren't checked again because you had your little orange band on.
Oh, that's
And it was done very well. It was
Yeah.
really done well. It was not a full house though.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, the coffee gallery opened back up a couple of weeks ago, and Bob Stain has been insisting that people have masks and be vaccinated. And he's been getting full houses for that. And it's not a huge place. It's the kind of size of the Folk Music Center,
Right.
but he's been getting audiences.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Yeah.
We-
As,
Sounds good.
We have season tickets to A Noise Within, and they polled their subscribers to see what they wanted. And that you have to show proof of vaccination when you go into the theater and wear a mask the whole time.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be untoward to require proof of vaccination.
yeah. As a participant, I would feel safer if I knew everybody was vaccinated.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think we need to cough up the staff to do that inquiring and certifying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. They just had people at the theater checking, and you had to show either on your phone with the digital or your
Mhm.
card that showed you'd been vaccinated. And they said they would refund your ticket or book you for another show if you wanted to, but you could not come in. And that was at the behest of their subscribers. So
Yeah.
it's in the interests of places to do that.
Well, I was thinking at the Folk Music Center, a good portion of our audience has always been from Pilgrim Place. And I would imagine those people would feel safer coming if they knew that everybody was vaccinated and would be wearing a mask.
They
Absolutely.
recently had a shutdown because of COVID in their
Oh, I know.
campus.
They just came out of a shutdown at Pilgrim
Yeah.
Place.
It'll be interesting to see if they go ahead with a Pilgrim Festival.
They aren't.
They
They
aren't.
canceled.
They
No,
have.
they canceled.
And I like the idea of the wristband thing, just because I think you can get those at like Office Depot or something, but it
Yeah.
just seemed to me like a really easy way of like not wondering, okay, did that person get checked or not or whatever?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then nobody's arguing or feeling goofy or uncomfortable about it, and it's just done.
And that was the LA Opera that did that.
Right.
Well, I
So
can,
Noise Within didn't do that. They just let you in and then didn't let you back out.
yeah. I can run it by Ellen and see what she says.
Hollywood Bowl is just you wear masks the whole time.
Hmm.
Yeah. Probably because that's outside. Yeah.
Right. Right. And they put up on the little screens there. We saw Beethoven's Fifth there. So good. With the LA Phil. But on the screens they put up, if you see anyone with their improperly wearing their mask, text this number, which anybody who was thinking about improperly wearing their mask could also see.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Prevented it from happening in the first place, which was a really good tactic.
Yeah.
That is. That is.
Wow. People
So
are getting very creative in how they're, handling all of
Exactly.
it.
They want people to come. And a lot of
Right.
people just don't feel comfortable unless they're doing things like this, and us included.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'd be willing to be a person who checks people at the door and puts a little band on them, but somebody's going to have to teach me how to read the phone version of our
Yeah,
vaccinations.
you can pull up your own and see what it looks like just by going to My COVID. And you tell them the date that you got it from your card and where you got it, and then it'll pull up your record. You can see what it looks like.
Is that mycovid.com or .org?
No, there's a state website that has all the stuff from the different agencies that have been doing the vaccinations.
Yeah,
And
my
there's
turn, maybe.
yeah, and there's a little QR code that you get, but mainly it gives the name and the dates of the vaccinations.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I got my shot last week, they took time to enter all 3 of my doses in so that I could have online access from that point forward via computer, internet. So that was nice to know, because I wondered, what do I do if I lose my vaccination card? And they said, this is what you do.
Yeah, I put mine in a piece of plastic.
I lost mine.
Oh, whoa.
You can get a replacement card, but there is a fee for that. I know Pasadena Health Department said it's about $20 to
Yeah,
replace
but
the
anybody
card.
could buy those.
Well, what I have Kaiser health insurance, and I
Oh.
just went on the Kaiser website and I printed out the verification of my shots. It's
There you
not
go.
it's not on a nice little card I can put in my wallet, but it's something I can show.
Yeah, that works too.
See, that's the problem. If I'm checking all these different things, there's like 20 different ways. And if somebody gives me a QR code, I'll scream. So
Yeah.
Well, the ones with the QR code have the actual dates printed right below the QR code.
Yeah.
okay,
So
you're gonna
so
have
you
to show me
literally-
that.
You just have
Yeah.
to scroll down a couple of lines to get the dates. It shows
Okay.
them.
All right.
The other one's 500. We don't need 500. 500 too. They have stickers. We can get the stickers and we can hand them out to anybody that buys a ticket that shows it.
So when you buy the ticket or when you come through the door?
When you come to the door, you show it, you show your proof, and then we give them a sticker.
Yeah. That would be easier than a bracelet.
Or
This
you
is-
could even do like a hand stamp, you said just with a stamp pad and a stamp of some kind on the back of the hand,
That's
you know,
true.
Yeah,
and then that, I'm
That
sure
might
there are
be
people
easier
who
than a
have,
sticker could come along.
if somebody has a stamp.
yeah, because I'm sure among some of us, we've got rubber stamps from, any creative endeavors, or, you can get one for like $3 at Michael's or whatever. But that might be a cheap way to do it too. So,
Mhm.
Hmm.
so did you guys polish off that bottle of wine there?
No, this one's really bad. The Chardonnay is what we polished off.
Yeah, we had a stag's leap Chardonnay that was a little
This was-
better than this one.
Cooking
This
wine.
one was recommended by a friend, by somebody Jane
Somebody in the
knew.
grocery store.
And we decided that would be good for cooking.
But we had a wonderful dinner.
Any announcements, Nick, besides what you already did about the Folkworks?
No, although this weekend is the Folk Alliance Region West Conference. So if anything comes out of that, I'll let people know. There is a really cool project that's being done in conjunction with that I've been a part of the last couple of years, called Now See Here, HEAR. And it's a matter of taking one art form and turning it into another. And so, for instance, there are songwriters who wrote a song based on a photograph or a painting, and there are visual artists who did a visual piece of art based on a song that came out of that. There have been at least 2 examples of people cooking dishes based on some art form. And I and a couple of other people who do spoken word stuff were asked to join in and do stories based on some of the things.
I wrote a poem to a piece of music.
And so I'll be doing another one this weekend and together with some of the other storytellers. But it turns out it's really inventive and fun. And I've ended up working with some fairly interesting named musicians simply because we're working on the same thread of these things. So it's been a lot of fun doing that. And somebody did a comic strip like cartoon based on a story that I did based on a photograph that was based on a song. So some of these threads keep going. And that one was my favorite so far, simply because people keep getting inspired by this thing that started out as something very simple. But anyway, it's Now See Here, HEAR. And I'll send John the website, because at some point you have to see some of this stuff, because some of the creations are amazing. And on the website, you can play the songs back and listen to the stories and see the visual art. And it's just, we do something every year. And this year the conference is virtual. So we're going to be doing a virtual get together and doing stuff from this thread. And so in theory, I'll do a new story for it.
What's the status of your library now, Nick?
Well, it didn't fall down yet. Um, for those of you who didn't hear the story, the Pasadena Central Library turns out to not have been safe ever.
What?
And this should have been noticed in the 80s and in the 90s, but both times apparently nobody actually checked the things that they said they were supposed to check. And that includes violations of the law in the 1990s when they were supposed to actually do these inspections for this specific purpose. The building it's weirdly built. It looks like the structural supports of the building have these hollow pillars that are masonry pillars doing the vertical support. Those should have had steel rebar or concrete inside those hollow pillars, and it doesn't look like that was ever done.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
going to crack.
And that means that against the force of gravity, it's great, but an earthquake strong enough to actually shake the building sideways would cause these structural pillars to crumble, and those are what keeps the floors apart.
Holy
so
moly.
the problem is because these are inside the supporting structural walls, this is a hideously expensive thing to fix. And so they think that they will have to do a bond issue to come up with the money to repair the building. They cannot do a bond issue until November of next year.
Oh,
And it's estimated a 2-year repair job if and when they get the money together. The city received $4 million from the state to do the project to examine the building and do an in-depth study of what needs to be done. Because all this came to light because they wanted to retrofit the building for ADA and various other things, stuff that had been overlooked over the years, and probably fix the plumbing and electrical stuff that was from the 1920s. And so that was when they ran across these photos showing these hollow pillars being built in place. And it's like, wait, where's the rebar? Where's the concrete? What's going on here? And in the 1990s, after the Northridge quake, the buildings, the masonry buildings in Pasadena were all supposedly examined for this very purpose. And they examined City Hall and they spent a lot of money fixing up City Hall. But somehow the library got overlooked in that, probably because it doesn't look like it's a masonry structure.
wow.
But the fact is that under that cool exterior, there's a lot of brickwork of these big concrete blocks and smaller regular bricks. And in this, they also discovered that that beautiful facade with the writing on it on the front of the building, it's not really being held up by enough.
Oh.
And so in a different kind of earthquake, one that causes vertical jostling where the rest of the building would stay in place, that would have fallen right down on the entryway.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. So I'm currently in a non-office at one of the branch libraries, and it's annoying. I've only been back in the central library twice since the start of May to get some stuff out of the building, but it's awful because it's going to be like a ghost town for about the next 3 years at best, except for workers going in to do examination and library staff going in for short periods to do stuff where they figure, well, the odds are there's not going to be a major earthquake in the next half hour.
Wow.
Wow. You know, my mother's high school was a brick building in San Leandro up in the Bay Area, and they had to condemn it and knock it down because it was supposedly not earthquake safe, and it was too expensive to, you know, retrofit it. They couldn't knock it down. the wrecking ball hit it. And I mean, it's just like it took forever to knock this thing down. So everyone's like shaking their heads, going, well, we would have been safe in that thing during an earthquake, but had no way of knowing that. So
By any chance, was that building built around 1910?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check. Why?
Because the oldest building at Caltech was torn down in the 1970s, and they discovered that the builders overbuilt the plans and put in a lot of stuff in structural support that wasn't in the architect's version that they had on file. And apparently this was something that happened back then, where the builders would look at what the architect drew and said, no, that's not strong enough. We're going to fix it, and not tell anybody what they'd done. So back in the 70s, after the Sylmar quake, they decided, because the bell tower on the very top of the building was showing obvious damage, that obviously they would need to tear it down, because there was plaster damage and stuff like that. And then when they actually started to do it, it was incredibly difficult to take down, because it had steel structural support in there that hadn't been written into the plans.
Oh, man.
Ah, wow.
Well, and you figure if the San Francisco quake hit, it was 1906, I think. If anything was built shortly thereafter, yeah, they probably added a few extra measures of security, especially up in the Bay Area where San Leandro is. So
Yes. Well, that happened down here too, apparently.
Yeah. Funny.
Thanks for getting us together, John.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I'm going to put in, when I send out the summary, the information for buying a ticket to Timpanogos online festival, because for $60, you get 2 weeks of viewing, and I don't know how many storytellers, but they always have good storytellers there. And the way they have it set up, you have until January 4th to view them.
Oh, wow.
But once you activate it and watch the first video, you have 2 weeks from that time. So we haven't started watching them yet. We're waiting until we're sure we have a 2-week block that's not, filled with other things to do, so we get a chance to see all of them. But it gives you some flexibility.
Yeah, I saw an email on that. Yeah, go ahead and send that link. I think that would be a great thing to have over the holidays, especially.
Yeah, we've been watching the National Storytelling Festival virtual thing, and I was telling Barbara right when I opened up the connection, the section, they had one session of British Isles storytellers, and it just was awesome. They were just incredible. And of course, Claire Murphy was one of them, and I love her.
I do too.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
It's going to be a long recording this time.